and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me today, I have a Jer.
Hello.
And a Wheeler.
Ahoy.
A reminder, North 100 is brought to you by you through support of the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Welcome to part one of our Adventures in the Forgotten Realms Canadian Highlander set review. This is your first time listening to our set reviews. They're a little different. This is not exhaustive. We do not talk about every single card, only the cards that we think are relevant to the format. We're going to be going by color, so today, white and blue, and then other cards in future episodes. Also, we are covering the Commander Precon decks because it turns out there are some totally sweet cards in there that are worth paying attention to and not necessarily sleeping on, which I did for years, and I'm consistently surprised and blown out by just bombs from those Precon sets. But let's jump right into it. And our first card today is the Book of Exalted Deeds. This is a legendary artifact for white, and reads, at the beginning of your end step, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, create a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying. And then it has an activated ability, white, tap and exile it. Put an enlightened counter on target angel. It gains. You can't lose the game and your opponent can't win the game, but activate only as a sorcery. Wheeler, start us off.
I'm going to go with like hilarious part first, because I laughed about this for like 10 minutes. If you use the activated ability on a Mutavault or a Faceless Haven, like a creature land that's an angel, basically, Storm can't win. Like, they can, if they have like a lightning bolt or like a fire ice, sure. But typically, if you're playing a card with triple white pips and you have the audacity to play something like this, you have Mother of Ruins, Giver of Ruins, you have a bunch of other stuff like that. They can, I guess, Assassin's Trophy it too. Like, but
not every deck runs Wasteland.
I was just howling at that. That's just the funniest thing. I love that. And that's not happening that often. That's not why I want to play this card. I want to play this card because if you gain 3 or more life, you make an angel. That's it. I just want to gain. I like playing things that when I gain life, they do things. And this is perfect.
How do you feel about the card Lightning Helix?
Love the stuff. Love the stuff.
War Leader's Helix.
Oh, can't get enough of it. Foundry Helix, even new card for Modern Horizons 2. Love it.
I was just doing chronological.
Lightning Bolt with Soulfire Grandmaster. I mean, even just Soul Wardens. Like, this is my favorite kind of do nothing card, but at the same time, it also just kills people dead. There are a lot of risks that come associated with it. It's an artifact that costs triple white, and you have to gain 3 life and play a deck that wants to do that. That's a risk. But other than that, this card's great. I mean, it's a lot of fun. Great's a strong word, but I will play it, and I foresee winning some amount of matches of Magic the Gathering with it.
And then at some point, you're gonna, that's the 100th card in the list, and it's gonna get swapped around for other fun cards.
Yeah. Or I'll sabotage myself and cut like a staple.
A good card for it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, we have another card here that might go pretty well with it, and that is the Cleric class, the first of the classes we're going to be talking about in the set review. Level 1, if you would gain life, you gain that much life plus 1. And then there's an activated ability you can only do as a sorcery that costs 3 and a white that gets you to level 2 and says whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. If you're not familiar with how classes work, when you level up to level 2, you also keep your level 1 ability. Those seem pretty good together. And then 5 mana gets you to level 3, 4 and a white. When this class becomes level 3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield and gain life equal to its toughness. Wheeler.
So classes are kind of interesting. They definitely lead you to getting blown out occasionally, and you kind of want the level 1 effect mostly, I think. Like you have to be okay with the level 1 effect, which is usually just like, oh, okay. And then you're really gunning for that level 2. Level 5 is gravy. So sticking to the whole Book of Exalted Deeds deck, Cleric class at level 1, your deck that's already gaining extra life isn't that much, but it's not a bad thing necessarily. And getting that level 2 is kind of huge, right? Like turning anything into an Ajani's Pridemate, or just being able to target your Walking Ballista that might have lifelink through something. You kind of build your own Heliod combo.
Yeah, I was about to say Heliod, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you can do some Devoted Druid shenanigans as well, Spike Feeder shenanigans, and importantly, a lot of these cards, as well as this card, are less than 3 mana, or well, they're 3 or less, meaning that, your Savine's Reclamations can grab this back, your Luris can play this one off off its ability. And then if you get to level 5, which are slow-ish.
Or level 3, but for 5 mana.
Oh, sorry, yeah. If you get to level 3 for 5 mana in a deck that, might have mana dorks or might just feel like you're wasting your opponent's time, you get this sweet reanimation ability. So I like this. I feel like this one might actually just end up being not worth it in the end.
Yeah, it's 10 mana to get to the end, right?
Yeah, over a couple of turns though, and like that, considering how like agonizing it is to play against the Soul like Martyr of Sands deck.
I guess you got the time. That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the most fun card to pronounce in the entire set, Flumph, which is more of a sound effect than a name, but here we are. Flumph is a 2-mana 0/4 jellyfish for 1 and a white, has Defender and Flying, and whenever it is dealt damage, you and target opponent each draw a card. JR, what do you think?
It's kind of a weird one. I don't really know how to evaluate it. Like, my instinct is it's kind of like cute and gimmicky, but not very good. But I could see if you were like trying to like do some weird like prison-y shenanigans, then there might be a situation where you would want to play this card. But I don't think you're playing it in like a typical strategy.
As the control deck, it's just too risky to give your opponent more cards, even if you're blocking profitably.
Yeah, definitely. Their cards are typically lower mana, and your deck is built to get card advantage anyway. So like giving both players card advantage is actually like evening the scales. It's not symmetrical.
All right, fair enough. Let's move on to our first Planeswalker of the set review, Grand Master of Flowers. This is a 4-mana 3 loyalty Bahamut Planeswalker for 2 white, has a static ability. As long as Grand Master of Flowers has 7 or more loyalty counters, he's a 7/7 Dragon God creature with flying and indestructible. And then +1 ability, target creature without first strike, double strike, or vigilance can't attack or block until your next turn. Or +1, search your library and or graveyard for a card named Monk of the Open Hand. Reveal it and put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle. JR, what do you think?
I think it depends a lot on Monk of the Open Hand. And just for reference, Monk of the Open Hand is a 1-mana 1/1 elf monk, and it has, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So that's not terribly exciting. So basically all it's doing is plussing. You're hoping you can make their best creature not able to attack or block, but you have to hope their best creature has none of first strike, double strike, or vigilance. Otherwise that ability doesn't work. And if they do have first strike, if their best creature has first strike, double strike, or vigilance, chances are you can't attack. And for that reason, I think it's just going to be too narrow in a singleton format. Like I think the idea with this card is to like sort of get a stream of Monk of the Open Hands and be able to impact the board that way. But in our format where you only have access to a maximum of 1, and even playing the 1 isn't very exciting, is probably means this one's not gonna see too much play.
Right on. All right, next up we have Guardian of Faith. This is a 3-mana 3/2 Spirit Knight for 1 white, has flash and vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, any number of other target creatures you control phase out. Wheeler, what do you think?
This is just another entry into the long list of white creatures that try to save you from wraths or spot removal, but this one costs 3, and that's pretty good because 3 is 1 less than 4, and it doesn't fly, but like people just die to flash creatures with 3 power. Even though this doesn't have, flying, vigilance is kind of neat, makes it a little bit harder to attack into this as well. It's creature types I struggle to call, like, they're relevant, but
Yeah, like ish. They're relevant-ish. They're recognizable. How about that?
Yeah, I'm sure somebody with a night deck or a spirit deck is happy to see a playable card being added to their decks. That's I'm happy for them as well. Phasing's pretty neat too, because what's the I should double check the phasing. If you phase something out with an equipment on it.
Yeah, it stays attached. Auras, equipment, +1/+1 counters, -1/-1 counters.
Unless the equipment is attached to a token and you phase out the token.
Yeah.
Then the equipment's gone forever. The old Sapphire Charm, your germ token trick.
Oh, dang.
That old chestnut. It's been too long.
So, yeah, the better way to think about phasing is not that it leaves play and comes back. It's that you, like, take a Kleenex and cover it for a second, and then take the Kleenex off and like, surprise, it was there the whole time.
It's just object permanence.
Yeah. Get dizzy for a second and forget it exists, and your opponent just nods along.
So that's kind of neat because like decks that play this card are likely to have some amount of equipment, right? They're likely to play stuff like that, and being able to avoid the additional cost on equip is kind of neat. So yeah, I like this card. I like it a lot.
And this is probably D&T, maybe White Weenie or aggressive white decks?
Yeah, I think you're going to want this in aggressive to aggressive mid-range white decks. I'm sure shocked that you haven't peeked up about this for blue-white tempo, though.
Yeah, it has flash.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. That's going to have a home in there. I mean, being able to keep all your mana up for a tempo deck is the name of the game.
And you know how powerful Vigilance is with equipment. You of all people.
Because suddenly you have the biggest creature on the board.
And it can both attack and block.
Yeah, flashing this in and then equipping a sword to it. Like that's one of the best parts about Resto Angel is it has flash. Like it's like, play this, untap, put a sword on it. You're never winning. You are never winning this game. I apologize. Yeah.
You don't usually apologize. I've seen him do it. Never once seen him apologize.
I will never.
Look, when you're playing a game, there's an understanding that both players are, in a very polite and respectful setting, trying to take each other's heads off.
Yeah, but I don't claim to pity my opponent at any point. I acknowledge my dream crushing tendencies and embrace them.
Yeah, I'm Canadian enough that I say sorry for the bad beats sometimes, but I mean I don't mean it.
But I say it, all right? I go through the song and dance. Dang.
Yeah. It's called culture.
Well, speaking of cold as ice, let me segue over to Icing Death, the Frost Tyrant, a.k.a. Ben Wheeler. I thought that was a pretty good segue.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Thank you.
Boom roasted.
Wheeler over here is a legendary dragon, 4/3 for 2 white, has flying and vigilance. And when it dies, create Icing Death, the Frost Tongue, a legendary white equipment artifact token with equipped creature gets +2/+0. Whenever equipped creature attacks, tap target creature defending player controls, and equips for 2. Jer, your thoughts?
So the card is pretty good. 4 mana, 4/3 with flying and vigilance is you really want that 4th point of toughness or like a sweet ETB. The death ability is nice, but it's not as reliable as an ETB. Getting the equipment is really nice, but I really dislike the like fundamental design of this card that forces you to get this equipment token, because normally it's fine to represent a creature with like a piece of paper or like a normal token flipped backwards, but if you don't have the equipment token and this card is like 4 cards down in your graveyard, people are going to forget about it and it's going to be such a nightmare to play against. So like I want to like the card, but I'm just biased by how much I dislike
the design part of it.
Absolutely needing this exact token or the game state's going to be a
real mess,
a clown fiesta.
My problem with this, as you mentioned, is 3 toughness, which makes it match up extremely unfavorably against all of the blue flyers in the deck, all of the 3 ones with flash.
Yeah, but like that, there's 3 of them. It's 100 cards. They're not going to have them all the time.
You know damn well they always have
it. Please.
But the equipment is quite good.
Yeah.
But you just have to have the token for it. Otherwise, no one will ever remember what it does.
I kind of wish this was a double-faced modal card like they had in the previous set of a legendary dragon on one side and the equipment on the other.
It's like when it dies, it becomes the token. Perfect. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah.
So overall,
I think it's worth playing because I like in an aggressive deck getting this equipment after they've spent resources. Like they have to spend resources to kill this. It's almost always trading for either like a relevant creature of theirs or a like reasonable removal spell. Like if it gets lightning bolt, that feels bad, but basically any other removal spell, and you're like, yeah, that's fine.
All right.
But and then you have this equipment and it makes blocking impossible.
Yeah. Next up, we have Ingenious Smith. This is a 2-mana 1/1 human artificer for 1 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. The rest go on the bottom of your library in a random order. And then there's a triggered ability. Whenever 1 or more artifacts enter the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Ingenious Smith, but this ability only triggers once each turn. Nailed it. Absolutely flawless take, Wheeler.
That was good. Glintness Crane and I don't talk. That bird has betrayed me far too many times. It's wild. You'll play a deck with like 50 plus artifacts, and all you need to do is whiff once on a card that looks at the top 4, and you'll never play it again.
Oh, just absolutely betrayed. Just send it into the sea. I know the feel.
Well, I didn't drown a bird, if that's what you're implying.
Oh, dude, you should see me in Treasure Hunt. I've never been able to look at a treasure token again.
But this one happens to be in white. It happens to be a cheap white creature, so it's likely to find itself among Moxen, cheap equipment, cheap artifact creatures, or artifact tokens, including tokens that may be generated on your opponent's turn, artifacts that might enter the play off of a Stoneforge Mystic or two, well, just one because we're singleton, on their turn. And this gets pretty big, honestly. It gets pretty big. And it's, again, I bring up Luris every time, but I just love that card. And anytime I see something that passes like the Luris Savine's Reclamation test, I just go like, oh yeah, I'm going to replay this over and over and over again. So yeah, I feels like we do this every single set that comes out, but I'm convinced that there's just enough cards now that you could play a mono white equipment / artifact aggro deck, or a white red or Jeskai or whatever. Like, there are so many divergent builds now, and I think this one is pretty good in that.
This is interesting. I was very medium on this card for that exact same archetype, because I don't know. I just thought for maybe I just have to do some math on 2-drops, but 2-drop threats. I look at this and I'm not that excited, but I guess if you're evaluating how likely you are to hit an artifact and the grow threat, because I'm like, a 2-mana 3/3 that maybe, let's say 10% of the time replaces itself because of our luck, look at 4 cards. 50-50 chance, never fires.
I won't talk about it right now, but the fact that it's a human and an artificer is going to be very relevant. But we'll cover that in a hot second here.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on then to the very good dog, the Loyal Warhound. Look at those jowls. Yes. Warhound is a 2-mana 3/1 dog for 1 and a white, has vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for a basic plains, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Wheeler.
I should have removed this because I have to be the guy that says I don't want to play this dog. Okay, hear me out.
Okay, Icing Death. Wow.
No, I mean, vigilance is, I say this, but I will play this dog in something. But Knight of the White Orchid.
Yeah, 2/2 first strike. Yeah.
2/2 first strike. Human. Much better.
Can Knight of the White Orchard find a non-basic as well, or is it still basic?
Serge, I haven't included that card in a deck that isn't just finding a basic plains.
Pretty sure it's just a plains.
Yeah, it's just plains. Yeah.
Okay. It's for a plains card, not even a basic plains card.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It is white, and it is riding a fabulous cat steed.
I think they're, I mean, this is just cats and dogs.
All over again, man.
Yeah. What I'll say is that I don't play a lot of Knight of the White Orchid anymore, but the decks that I do, I think Knight is better than this card, but I think if I am playing a deck where I do have Knight, I'm likely to also have this card.
That's fair. Next up, we have Nadar, Selfless Paladin. This is a 3-mana 3/3 legendary dragon knight for 2 and a white, has vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, venture into the dungeon. Then a static ability, other creatures you control get +1/+1 as long as you've completed a dungeon. Now, I'm going to throw this to Jer, but first I want to open up the conversation about the dungeon in Canadian Highlander, because we haven't talked about this yet. Do you want to start with that, Jer?
Sure, yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think most of the time you shouldn't plan to complete a dungeon. There are 3 dungeons, and one of them is very quick to complete, but you get like a minimal amount of value, like lots of it's symmetrical. There's a dungeon that's very long to complete, and you get a lot of value, but most of it's towards the end. And then there's sort of like a mid-rangy-ish dungeon where you get a bunch of value. But like none of them are like, oh, I've completed the dungeon, I'm going to win now. Like none of them are that strong. And there's also just not that many cards with repeatable ways to do it efficiently. So it's going to come up. Some cards, it like might push them enough to see play, but most of the time it's not going to be terribly impactful. That being said, though, I think this card's reasonable to test out. Like it's a reasonable card. You're probably going to get two ventures, get to venture into the dungeon twice at least. You're going to get to enter the battlefield and attack once as a pretty common play pattern, I think. And you're going to get some amount of value out of that. So that probably makes it worth at least testing. And it also has a lot of upside as well, because if you're able to keep it around with like an equipment or combat tricks, or if your opponent just isn't playing creatures, which is becoming more and more common these days, you're going to get to keep doing it, and it's just going to keep getting you value. So this card's reasonable to test, I think, but I wouldn't doubt if I ended up cutting it in the not too distant future.
Fair enough. All right, next up, we have Oswald Fiddlebender. This is a 2-mana 2/2 legendary gnome artificer, and has an activated ability with the flavor text Magical Tinkering. Put 1 and tap and sack an artifact. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value, put it onto the battlefield, shuffle, and activate only as a sorcery. Hey, Wheeler, you ever want a, I don't know, artifact pod? How you doing there, bud?
This is like the first time I play an Academy deck or eggs at like a paper event after, you know, quarantine it's going to be sensory overload. Like this card's really good, Serge. Yep. It's a birthing pod for your artifacts.
Pretty high on the, like, is this strong enough that if you untap with it, you win? Kind of like pod?
Yep. Yeah.
You want to walk us through a line?
No. No.
Fair. I can respect that.
What the line I do want to walk you through is the Artificer line. Because they've been printing more and more cards that are Artificers. They also have a lot of these Artificers as human Artificers. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And they all happen to be within Jeskai. And recently, we got a new birthing pod in the form of Pyre of Heroes from Kaldheim. It's a tribal birthing pod and a 2-mana artifact. So you have lines. I've just been calling it Artificer Pod, but like you have lines to go from like, you know, Imperial to Recruiter or Recruiter of the Guard or Trinket Mage up to like Urza, up to Auriok Salvagers.
Oh, because you can go from hero, like human artificer to human wizard back to it.
You can go. Oswald being only an artificer and a gnome can make it a bit harder because you can't say go Oswald into like Imperial Recruiter or whatever, but that's okay. Like you can throw in a goblin engineer in there or a goblin, you know, welder, like actual proper goblin welder. It's kind of wild. Like it just popped out of nowhere because they just keep printing them.
I mean, we've been talking about some of the density in these new tribes that we've been kind of sleeping on for a while, right?
Not to mention the point spread of Black Lotus Birthing Pod Tolarian Academy might be the funniest. And like, I'm pretty sure I gave that spread to Jer as like a troll spread.
Yeah.
And now it's just all I think about.
Yeah, we used to do like die rolls, and whoever lost the D20 die roll, the other person got to make up like a ridiculous point spread.
Yeah, here's your point spread. You have to play a deck with this.
So an aside, legitimately one of my favorite Canadian Highlander stories I ever remember was, I don't know what was going on, but it was myself, Wheeler, and Spencer Sacklin, and we were rolling D20s, and the person who lost, you'd put a stake up there of an archetype you couldn't play for a month. I'd be like, I'm gambling lands, and then Spencer would be like, all right, Naya aggro, and then low roll, you can't play it for a month, and it's just a way to sort of shake up what we've been brewing.
To cap this off, it escalated to a point where it was cutting archetypes for like entire years. And at the end of it, I came out unable to play like some deck that like Hoof. I couldn't play Hoof for like 6 months, and I hadn't been playing Hoof, or like I had just played a bunch of Hoof and like one like back-to-back events or something. I was like, I'm good. Like I've got my rocks off with that. And then it's like, yeah, I won't have to pay this for 6 months. And he lost like 4 decks for a year. And he's just like, what do I do? I can't play.
He lost like Naya, Sandy, B, 4-color blood.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
All right. Can we want to move on?
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have another class. We have the Paladin class. Single white mana, level 1 ability. Spells your opponent's cast during your turn. 1 more to cast. Level 2 for 2 and a white. Creatures you control get +1/+1. And level 3 for 5 mana, 4 and a white. Whenever you attack until end of turn, target attacking creature gets +1/+1 for each other attacking creature and gains double strike. What do you think, Wheeler?
This one's a little interesting. Like this one's a bit harder. I think it's more powerful than Cleric class, but also just like, this is one of those classic cards where you look at it, you're like, oh, it does all these things I want. I will never play this card.
Yeah. You're like, these are all cool effects. I have no idea what deck I'd ever put it in.
Yeah. because like you look at it and you're like, D&T or whatever, but you don't. There's no room. There's no room. Maybe like a very aggressive mono white build, like talking Savannah Lions proper mono white, could play this, but then the kind of advice I give to people that want to play this card in that deck is just play another creature or like play something that's better. So yeah, I think this card has a lot going on for it that synergizes well with the other cards you're likely to play around it. But at the same time, when are you playing this card? Like maybe green white tokens or Naya tokens, because it's an anthem. You're already a deck that primarily operates at sorcery speed, and then the ultimate just kills people because you're attacking with flying tokens and whatnot. But even then, it's like just play a planeswalker. So this card's great. Big fan of it. I'll never play it, Serge.
All right. You know what's funny? Because that card seems very powerful, and you're like, meh. Here's a card that I cut, and Wheeler's like, are you out of your mind? We're talking about Portable Hole. This is an artifact, a white artifact for a single white mana. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value 2 or less until it leaves the battlefield. Wheeler.
It's a hell of a hole, Serge. It's a hell of a hole. You can find this card off Trinket Mage as a 1 mana artifact. Hitting a thing with mana value 2 or less, well, gosh golly, that includes Collector Oof, and Collector Oof usually is bad news. You can't beat it, Serge. You can't beat it.
Well, you can now, can't you?
Oh, you better believe you can. And Academy decks playing white, like moving into being blue-white as opposed to blue-green, or just, Academy players being like, oh, wait a minute, we can add every mana and nothing matters. Great. You could play this card and muck their Collector Oof, but there's also just some fair-ish applications to it. Of course, being a cheap artifact that can hit Ren and 6, that can hit pesky, just creatures in the way, like just killing a giant Scavenging Ooze, resetting that, or like getting a Tarmogoyf out of the way isn't the worst. There typically cards like this come with some risk, right? And again, mono white's filled with cards that are good that do similar things, so I play this. But I think it has enough going for it that there are certain situations, depending on what type of, what your build is and what you care about getting rid of, that you're going to want to jump into this Portable Hole.
All right. Next up, Priest of Ancient Lore. This is a 3-mana 2/1 dwarf cleric for 2 and a white. And when it enters the battlefield, gain a life and draw a card. Jer. Like, you got to be able to do something busted with this, right?
You're not doing anything super busted with it, but it's just a solid Allurin card. It's like...
Wait.
The most busted creature ETB deck? You're like, it's a role player.
My God, a 3-mana 2/1 that draws a card and gains a life? You've got to be doing something busted with. I mean...
Well, only because of how cheap it is. I was specifically thinking about Allurin and some of these like ETB creature loops that Jer has been able to capitalize on before.
Yeah, but the entire deck is like, once you get 2 cards, the rest of the deck combos with those 2 cards.
Okay. And like that deck has Uro now, which, I mean, it has had Uro for a while, which is in Cavern Harpy's colors, so that's kind of cool.
It's quite good, it turns out.
This card is great. I mean, it's cool.
I mean, it's good. It's definitely better than some of the cards you're already playing, and you're playing every color, so it goes in the deck, certainly. But is it groundbreaking? No.
That's fair.
Is it the best card for Allurin in this set? Also no.
Oh,
do you ever look at a card and kind of go like, wow, you think of a really stupid line you're going to have and you're like, oh, I'm definitely going to do this and it'll be embarrassing. Like I look at this card, I'm like, I'm going to cast this off like an Ancient Tomb or something.
Only costs 1.
Yeah. Not bad.
Do we play this not in Allurin?
No.
Well,
Clerics,
probably
maybe.
not. Oh, well, actually, I mean, you say that, but it is a 3-drop that draws you a card. I'm just reading the card now. It's a 3-drop in your Cleric Ironwork combo deck adjacent thing that let's just say probably for the sake of time.
There's room for exploration. All right, fair enough. Let's move on to the final white card of the day, the Teleportation Circle. This is a 4-mana enchantment for 3 and a white and says, at the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 target artifact or creature you control. Then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Jer.
So it, like Conjurer's Closet, before it is just sort of a bit too much do nothing for the blink deck. Like when you get to 4 mana, you really want to like cast one of your big payoffs or like one of your big enablers, or like play something that's going to like really gain you control of the board, or leave up mana to protect the cards you already have in play. And this card is sort of just like the epitome of a win more card. And Blink is definitely a win more deck, but you need to be careful about winning more.
Yeah, you gotta be able to win first before you win more. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you have to win more first before you win more.
Serge, I really like that line. You gotta be able to win first before you win more.
Oh, thank you. Little pearl of wisdom that I accidentally like dripped out when I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, this card's just a little too dirtily.
And out of curiosity, is there anything we may have overlooked with the artifact ability, which is a little bit different from some of these other effects?
Crickets.
All right, let's talk about blue cards. First up, we have Contact Other Plane. This is a 4-mana instant for 3 and a blue. Roll a d20. On a 1 to 9, draw 2. On a 10 to 19, scry 2, then draw 2. And on a natural 20, scry 3, draw 3. Jer.
This card's really interesting. I think it's one of the better draw 4s because I'm trying to figure out which one's the most likely. I think scry 2, draw 2 is
10 to 19 is 50%, 1 to 9 is 45, and then 20 is 5.
That's what I thought. So the majority of the time it's the same as the energy one, Glimmer of Genius, which I've played a bunch and been relatively happy with. Although I guess there's that new one that foretells now, which is probably better.
Oh yeah, Beyond the Multiverse.
But and people are going to play this because they have a 5% chance to scry 3 then draw 3. That's not why you should play it. I might have talked myself out of this card.
Yeah.
But I don't know. If you want to play it, play it. It's one of the reasonable 4-mana draw spells to play, I think.
Next up, we have Demi-Lich. 4 blue, 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 blue. So 4 blue pips, you get a 4/3 skeleton wizard, but this spell costs 1 blue pip less to cast for each instant and sorcery spell you've cast this turn. Whenever it attacks, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, copy it, and you may cast it. And then you may cast Demi-Lich from your graveyard by exiling 4 instant and or sorcery cards from your graveyard in addition to paying any additional costs, or any other costs rather. Wheeler, what do you think?
Oh, this card was made for me. Not like for my, favorite way of playing Magic. It's just a floating skull and it's called a Skeleton Wizard and has quad blue pips. I mean, wow. This is the coolest card yet. And I will absolutely play it, and I probably shouldn't, I think it's kind of okay. I don't know. Are you high on this, Jer?
Yeah, I actually think it's kind of good. I just want to jam it in blitz decks. I just want to play it alongside Arclight Phoenix, I think.
Yeah, that's where I am, but I've been poisoned by Murktide Regent.
Yeah, I mean, that card's too good.
Yeah.
But
so you look at a card like this, and you have to ask yourself, how many hoops is it asking me to jump through? And are those hoops reasonable?
Well, in blitz decks, you're already playing as many free spells that basically do nothing as you can. So casting it the first time won't be that hard. And then casting it from your graveyard is basically a free roll, I think.
Yeah.
And also you're playing about all the looting effects you can anyways. So bidding it feels really good because then you're if the game goes longer, you're just going to get a 4/3 back.
So this could have a very similar play pattern to Arclight Phoenix, for example, triple spell, bin it.
I just want to cast a bunch of spells that do nothing and then get this and Arclight Phoenix back and then lose.
And then lose? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's...
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever played Arclight Phoenix in Highlander, but if you're not getting 3 or 4 back, that card feels so miserable.
Yeah, it is shockingly... And I'll never stop.
No, I love every minute of it.
Yeah, I'm playing this flying Volshock Berserker that I will I will play so poorly just to get it back.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you're just oh, why did I do this?
All right, fantastic. Cool. All right, well, that's Demi-Lich, I guess. Next up, Dragon Turtle. This card's really weird. This is a 3-mana 3/5 Dragon Turtle for 1 blue, has flash. And when it enters the battlefield, tap it and up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. Share.
So this card is weird, but I think it's pretty good based on the size of creature. Like getting a 3/5 flash for 3 is very good. The fact that you have to do it is really unfortunate. It's not a May, notably, so it's always tapping itself no matter what. But assuming you're in a creature matchup and you're using this as a defensive tool, it will, because it has flash, you get to tap their creature and then you essentially get a turn cycle with your creature before they get their creature, assuming you're able to time it reasonably, which I don't see a reason why you wouldn't do that. Which means you're like getting rid of their best creature. It's just a hyper efficient 3-drop with like slight upside, I think, is what I'm going to call that ability. It's like most neutral to slight upside most of the time.
All right.
So it's a weird card, but I think it's overall fine.
Where are you playing it?
I think you would play this in a flash deck because that deck is often very good at like playing a bunch of flyers and then just getting in chip damage for the rest of the game. And this card is very good at holding the ground. You could play it in a tempo deck. I think 3-mana flash creatures that are reasonable are definitely at a premium in those decks. And this will be able to attack in a bunch of situations where other ground creatures can't. Yeah, I think it's... I doubt you'd play it in mid-range. It's like a little too weird and not just like smash you in the face powerful enough for that. But yeah, in decks where you really value the flash part of it, I think it's pretty reasonable.
All right. Next up, we have Grazilax, the Illithid Scholar. Is a 3-mana 3/2 legendary horror for 1 blue. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand. Whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, the most beautiful words in all of Magic, draw a card. Wheeler.
This is going to hang out with Edric and friends in like blue-green opposition time walk thing. There's probably a better name for it. I'm trying to not include Spellseeker in the name because it kind of ruins the magic. But you know, opposition Scrib Ranger.
Yeah, cool cards. It only plays cool cards.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Hull Breacher.
I'm going to try to speak vague, and people aren't going to entirely understand it, but hopefully they can parse from Jared's reaction. This is like a classic Kamola card to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You are correct.
Yeah, this is the kind of card that, like, you can play. It will do good things. It has genuine downside to it. But also, if your opponent is not ready for it and it goes unchecked, like, it can be a real nightmare. And you will leave wondering, like, how did I lose to this?
Oh, you have to say it could be a real horror, please.
If you just attack with your Snapcaster, you're just like in a board stall and you just attack with your Snapcaster Mage, what does your opponent do?
Yeah, like that's awful.
Well, I actually like this in tempo for that exact reason. If you have these efficient creatures, you always want more card draw. So being able to crack in, and a lot of your threats are often flash ETB things, which you don't mind getting back to your hand. I mean, it means you're never probably going to fight for the board that well.
Well, no, it's a May. You don't have to return it. So like if it's one of your like big grow creatures, then you're just going to be like, all right, I won't return it. Your thing dies. If it's your Snapcaster Mage, you're going to be like, yeah, I'll return it. I
mean, I kind of love the idea of attacking with a Snapcaster, even a Trinket Mage, right? I mean, what this allows you to do, can you imagine this with one ninja, right? Because nobody ever expects a ninja, and they're suddenly disincentivized to block, which we've already talked about opens up a lot of blow potential in our format. And they're like, oh, I don't want to get you some ETB value. I'll just take 2. And you're like, you've activated my trap card. Right?
Yeah.
I don't even think that's too cute. I think that's actually a play pattern you might be able to set up with this.
Yeah. That's what I guess that's what I was trying to get by, is that like if they are not prepared, this card is going to steal the game.
I do love Fallen Shinobi more than anyone should. So.
I will admit I was wrong about that card. My doctor does have a note written for me that says I have a condition where I am unable to read the number 5. And so I wasn't aware that it did a quarter of your life points per hit.
But that's just the beginning.
Yeah, I needed that. All I needed was for that card to hit me for 5 and then cast like a planeswalker from my deck. And I was like, oh, I was an idiot on the internet. Oopsie doopsie. Yeah.
Anybody have anything else nice to say about Grazilax here? I think we all are on board with it being really cool.
Yeah, I think it is both cool and good.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, I do have one, and this is actually relevant. Sorry. It isn't bounced by Thing in the Ice. People forget Thing in the Ice exists until I recently lost that card, and now I can't stop thinking about it.
Because it bounces non-horrors, right?
Yeah, and that's a card that you might run into with a deck with Grazilax or play it with Grazilax.
Fascinating. All right. Speaking of 5-drops, let's move on to Imrith Desert Doom. This is a 5-mana 5/5 legendary dragon for 3 blue. Has flying, has ward 4 if it's untapped, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Then, if you have fewer than 3 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. Jer, what are your thoughts?
I really like this card. I think it's great. It's very similar to Dragonlord Ojutai in that it protects itself the turn you play it while it's untapped. Its defenses go down when you attack, but by then you have mana to defend it, and then it just gets you incremental advantage while killing them quite quickly, which is everything you want in a like classic control finisher. I don't know if it's still reasonable to play these types of control finishers. Like the way the format's going, you just need to interact at instant speed. Going shields down even for a turn is so risky. So it's possible that the day of the 5-mana dragon may have sadly passed in our format, but I'd at least try this card out. It's sweet.
Good with Manamo.
Yes.
All right, next up, the Mind Flayer. Mind Flayer is a 5-mana 3/3 creature type horror for 3 blue. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature for as long as you control Mind Flayer. Jer, your thoughts?
The obvious comparison for me is Sower of Temptation, and that card's been almost pushed out of our format. And I think this card is significantly worse in that it both doesn't fly and costs more mana. So I think
pretty big downside.
I think it's just a little too clunky. It's a sweet card. I like the flavor's great, but yeah, I think it's just a little too slow and clunky for our format.
Alas, poor Mind Flayer.
Like if it was like something weird, like a 1/7 or something, then maybe I could get on board. But still only has 3 toughness. It's gonna die to the first thing, and then it did nothing.
Totally fair. All right, let's move on to our first commander card we're going to talk about today. This is Min, the Wily Illusionist. Min is a legendary gnome wizard 1/3 for 1 blue, so 3 mana altogether. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with this creature gets +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. And then it has an ability, whenever an illusion you control dies, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to that creature's power from your hand onto the battlefield. Wheeler, what do you think?
I'm a bit of a sucker for Jori N, which is like an Oath of the Gatewatch card that has the draw a second card clause. And I think we've received a couple of these cards, like Jolreel from M21.
Wasn't there like an entire mechanic in a set not too long ago, which was second card matters, second spell matters?
Yeah, from are you familiar with Throne of Eldraine?
Yeah.
It's,
Never heard of it. Repressed.
Yeah, that it's popped up, Fairy Vandal and whatnot. Long story short, oddly enough, some of those cards, those were like some of the only cards that weren't completely broken in half from that set, and still just reasonable at times. Drawing a second card each turn is not that difficult, but it doesn't happen as often as you'd think. Like when it doesn't happen, you're just kind of like, oh, I see. I'm playing a 1-mana, or I'm playing a 1/2 flyer. Okay. But this one makes creatures, and these creatures get big from either additional creatures that are being made or by the same card, or if you just happen to have other illusions in your deck, which, like, depending on what deck you're playing, you might not have that many, right? But like changelings, so like a masked vandal, phantasmal image will be an illusion for you. I guess like what, Maloku, like, they exist is what I'm saying. If you're playing like a murmuring mystic, which makes illusion tokens, you're going to get something out of that. But that's okay, because mostly these things just get big by existing and having a bunch of them. That's great. They don't fly, which is whatever, but that's okay. And then when they die, you can just either drop a couple of lands out or just play, like, depending on how big they get, just dropping out like, oh, okay, my illusion died in combat, I will put this Oko into play.
Yeah. Jace the Mind Sculptor. What?
Yeah, exactly. Which is great because you don't have to tap out sorcery speed.
This card feels kind of meh, but you add both abilities together and then it goes kind of Oh.
Yeah, like this is definitely the kind of card where it's I'm trying not to sell it as, the second coming, but I think it will do some work, right? Like
I compare this more to something like Talrand, right? Whenever you
right.
cast an instant or sorcery, make a blue Drake, which was a
Yeah.
4-mana 2/2. So it's this thing that is not that bad. It's not that impressive all by itself. You're definitely not getting a stat line for what you're paying, but it does have a tremendous amount of upside, right?
Yeah, 4 mana is a lot more than 3, and
Well, I would argue it's one more, but I know what you're
and
going for
that's
there.
so much. That's so much. And also shocks, like this blocks Ragavan. Like that
Yeah.
could just be end of story. It blocks
Yeah.
Ragavan and doesn't die to Bone Crusher Giant. So that's
All right.
enough for me. Yeah, I don't mind it. I'll give it a shot for sure.
All right, let's move on to another Planeswalker. We're going to talk about Mordenkainen. How did I do that okay? Kainen?
Mordenkainen.
All right, what Wheeler said. 6 mana 5/5 Planeswalker for 4 blue, +2 ability. Draw 2 cards, then put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. -2 ability, you get a dog illusion. It's a token, and its creature is power and toughness equal to twice the number of cards in hand, and then -10, pardon. Exchange your hand and library, then shuffle. You get an emblem that says you have no max hand size. Jerry, your thoughts?
I really like this card. It does cost 6, which is one more than 5, which means even I will consider not playing it. But all the abilities are really good. I think people are going to underestimate the -2 ability and how quickly that's going to get out of control. Like, even if you have 3 cards in hand, you just -2 get a 6/6. Like,
That's such a big dog.
and if everything's going like more according to plan, you're going to have 5 or 6 cards in hand, and then they're maybe just like on the abyss train to every dog you make, which is going to win you the game real quick. If you have more pressing matters, the +2 is really good at finding you ways to win. And the -10, which actually isn't that hard to get to because it's a +2 ability and it starts at 5, does win you the game. So
It's incredible that these dogs aren't legendary.
yeah,
I was just thinking that you could have multiple, right?
Oh my god. Yeah.
That's wild to me.
yeah, I'm
right.
definitely going to play this card. But should you?
No.
I'll probably play this in like the mono blue Academy with Time Walks deck.
Yeah, why not?
Like that dog just kills people
Yep.
immediately. Wow.
Next up, we have another commander card here. Let's talk about Phantom Steed. This is a 4 mana 4/3 horse illusion for 3 and a blue. Has flash, and when it enters the battlefield, exile another target creature you control until Phantom Steed leaves the battlefield. Whenever it attacks, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of the exiled creature, except it's an illusion in addition to its other types, and then sack that token at the end of turn. Wheeler.
Like just thinking about this card with Eternal Witness or Timeless Witness or Spell Seeker or any ETB really is pretty good. Like it is like it's a 4 mana threat, but flash kind of helps out with that. Getting bolted is kind of a oopsie doopsie, but that's okay. We're in blue and maybe they don't have the bolt immediately to deal with it. So we get to at least tuck something away. And then if you get to like just keep popping out value cards on attacks or popping out just like reasonably sized threats each attack, that's going to kill people very quickly or put you in a position where your horse is not dying.
I just want Knight of Autumn under this.
That's actually extremely hateful, and we don't need to.
I just want to gain life, Ben. Calm down.
God,
To activate all your life gain cards every turn.
This card has significant downside, though, because I don't know how many of you had tried to play with the champion mechanic, and what was that?
Lorwyn block.
Where you can't play this if this is the only creature you have.
But you can play this.
Oh, wait, no, you're right.
Yeah.
Because it's not champion. It's another. So you can just play it onto an empty board. Oh, the significant downside is gone. Oh,
Yeah.
Phantom Steed. Never mind, I'm on board.
And there's a bigger upside, Serge. It's a horse. Look at that. It's a ghost horse. I was disappointed by the Kaldheim ghost horse, but I could really get behind this ghost horse.
Oh, don't get behind a horse they kick.
Not a ghost horse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it goes right through you.
Oh, no, this thing hits like a truck. It's a 4/3.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, when I said go right through you, I mean it impales me with its hooves. but then I can die a happy man.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Ghost Horse is sweet. All right, next up, Silver Raven. This is a 1-mana 1/1 artifact bird for a single blue pip. Has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, scry. Wheeler?
I hate to rain on people's parades, but I am not playing this card in Flying Men, I don't think. Like, Flying Men doesn't need more Flying Men.
But surely this is better than some of the ones you're playing.
Well, the thing is, like, Flying Men is really just a battle of crossing your fingers that your opponent doesn't play things that you don't want to counter, but you end up having to counter, right? And so, like, having artifact birds, like having an artifact creature or like an enchantment creature like Hypnotic Siren is just, it means I have to, like, their Reclamation Sages and their Night of Autumns become Necrotals, or that their artifact destruction attached to their spell is just for sure killing my bird.
Oh yeah, Kolagon's command becomes so much better.
Exactly. And we already have a hard enough time with that card.
Yeah.
And so you just don't need, like, the little, like, it scries, which is great. It's a bird and it's cute, but we don't need more of that. You know, like, we need, Flying Men doesn't need more 1-mana 1/1 flyers. It needs more, I guess, cards like the next one, maybe.
All right, well, let's move on to the next one, maybe, which is Yon T. Allison. This is a 2-mana 2/1 snake rogue for 1 and a blue. It can't be blocked as long as it's attacking alone. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. Wheeler?
I can't tell you how annoying this card is to play with in, admittedly, a limited format, but a limited format where the ways to kill it are abundant. And then I think about playing this card in a format with Curious Obsession and Force of Wills.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, if I get to untap with this card, I feel like I'm probably winning the game. You know, like, the dungeons, there's a lot to them, and ultimately it's like, congratulations, you got all the goodies that a single Uro gets you.
Yeah.
But for a deck like Flying Men, and even getting, like, a treasure token is huge, because that provides additional mana without, you know, having to play more than 20 lands in your deck or whatever. So yeah, I'm kind of in love with this card for Flying Men, and I'll give it a shot in blue-green as well, although I think it's likely to not stick around for that deck, but it's got enough going for it that, yeah, I'm excited for this card.
I kind of like it in blue-black as well. I played like a ninja-y sub-theme blue-black tempo deck. And just the fact that it's a 2-mana 2/1, like, that gets you value while it's in play and has, like, unblockable.
Yeah.
Has a ton of value.
That's real gross.
Yeah.
Well, I look at this and ask myself, why this is rhetorical to set you up. Please don't roast me in the comments, chat. Why this and not Invisible Stalker, which does a better job of protecting itself?
Can I roast you in?
Please roast away. You can.
Right.
Comments, no.
Okay, so this has 2 power.
Uh-huh.
And it says, whenever it deals damage to a player, venture into the dungeon.
And to be clear, it's not just 1 more, it's twice as much, twice as many. Yeah, this is, like, Invisible Stalker is kind of awkward for that, because if it's your only threat, like, you don't need to protect it, but your opponent also just, like, doesn't need to care. Like, you need additional cards to make it relevant, whereas this card is just all good by itself. In fact, it's better when it's by itself. And then it does need a little help protecting, but it gets you some value to make protecting it a bit easier. And also, your deck is filled with disruptive cards to, like, trade up and protect your threats or yourself. So yeah. Also, it's a snake rogue.
Yeah, all right, that is kind of cool. All right, well, that is going to do it for part 1 of our set review. Now, typically at the end of these episodes, we say, hey, if there's a card that we missed that you want us to talk about, let us know down in the comments below. We also recognize that this is a set that has a tremendous amount of nostalgia and a lot of powerful feelings and associations with certain cards that you see. So before you say, why didn't you talk about this? Ask yourself, would you play this card in Highlander? Then, if the answer is yes, then post it down there. But there's a lot of cards that are just, like, kind of cool and, you know, might remind you of when you played Baldur's Gate or something like that, or your D&D session, but don't really make sense in the format. I don't know. I think I did a pretty good job of expectations there. Anything you want to add to that, friends?
Ask yourself if Jer and I would play it.
Wait, hold on.
What do you mean? I mean,
our bar is tremendously low.
I'm very curious, Serge. How'd you interpret that?
I I thought you were insinuating that you and Jer have better taste than I do.
No. We have worse taste.
Yeah.
All right. You only play bad cards in specific archetypes. We play bad cards in every archetype.
All right.
Yeah. Or I mean, we could have good taste but low standards. Wait. Hey, great show, everybody.
Great show. So if there's a card you want us to talk about, put it down in the comments below. We do read everything between episodes, and we'll see if there's some ones that stood out that we'll talk about in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. A reminder that everything we do is brought to you by you. We support the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. We'll see you in the next set review. The set's going to be great. Thank you so much for listening, and bye-bye.